from exposure to illness. By the end of this unit, you will describe how air pollutants enter the body. When we determine how air pollution impacts human health, we usually assume a continuum or temporal sequence between the exposure and the health effects. Once the individual has contact with a specific concentration of the pollutant in the environment, meaning this individual is exposed, the effective dose is the amount of the substance that interacts with a target site, such as the respiratory system or the eyes, over an interval of time to produce harm or illness. Ideally, we should be able to observe a considerable gradient proceeding from left to right in the continuum between exposure and illness. Even apparently healthy people are susceptible to the effects of long-term exposure to air pollutants without initial detectable clinical signs. Exposure can potentially accelerate the progression of a disease or perhaps even initiate it or make it clinically diagnosable. It is important to remember that science tells us that there is actually no threshold of air pollution levels under which no negative health effects are found. The routes of human exposure to air pollution include inhalation, dermal absorption, ocular exposure, and ingestion. The main pathway is represented by inhalation. Through inhalation, air contaminants reach different parts of the respiratory tract depending on several factors. This includes the exposure, the contact of pollutants with any part of the human body, and the dose, the actual number of pollutants that enter the body through the exposure pathways. Dose is influenced by the characteristics of the exposure, for example, how long a person is exposed, the specific characteristics of the pollutants, mainly size for particles and water solubility for gases, and physiological factors, including personal susceptibility, level of physical activity, and any skin conditions. Particles larger than 10 micrometers, also referred to as large coarse particles, persist in the humid oral and nasal cavities. Particles larger than 2.5 micrometers, but smaller than 10 micrometers, referred to as coarse particles, reach the upper airways and mucous membranes, causing coughing and tearing. Particles smaller than 2.5 micrometers, referred to as fine particles, can reach the bronchioles and alveoli. Finally, ultrafine particles, which are a subset of PM2.5 particles and which have a diameter smaller than 0.1 micrometers, are able to pass the alveolar capillary membrane. Alveoli are air sacs surrounded by capillaries that oxygenate blood. Here, we can see a cross-section of the alveoli. The light blue dots represent the particles that are able to cross the alveoli capillary barrier to enter the bloodstream, represented by the round red circles. When particles enter the bloodstream, negative health effects can occur elsewhere in the body. New evidence shows that ultrafine particles can also enter and damage the brain directly by translocation from the nasal epithelium via the olfactory nerve. As we have discussed, the deposition of inhaled particles is influenced by their size. Breathing patterns play a significant role in how far a particle can travel into the respiratory tract. The two breathing patterns are nose breathing, in which larger particles remain in the extrathoracic portion of the airways, while 5 to 10 micrometer sized particles are deposited in the respiratory bronchioles, and mouth breathing, in which the extrathoracic deposition is reduced, allowing larger particles to reach deeper into the respiratory tract. Breathing patterns are influenced, for example, by resting or exercising, standing or sitting, sleeping, or even talking. With regards to gases, there are different factors influencing their penetration in the respiratory tree, such as water solubility, concentration, and oxidizing power. Considering water solubility, the less soluble the gas, the deeper it penetrates into the lungs. Sulfur dioxide is very soluble in water and therefore damaging to the upper airways. Nitrogen dioxide and ozone are less soluble and can therefore reach and irritate the bronchiolar tract of the respiratory tree. Carbon monoxide is peculiar as its adverse health effects are not related to lung injury. Rather, its stronger binding affinity with hemoglobin compared to oxygen can impair the ability of the red blood cells to carry oxygen to the body tissues and organs. Recent bodies of evidence have shown that air pollution has the potential to harm almost all organs of our body. The main health effects can include respiratory diseases, including asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and pneumonia, cardiovascular diseases, including stroke, ischemic heart disease, and high blood pressure, lung cancer, type 2 diabetes, cataracts, premature birth, and skin aging. Remember that routes of exposure to air pollution beyond inhalation include ocular exposure, ingestion, and dermal absorption. You have now completed Unit 2. In the next unit, we will look at general pathological mechanisms.